The suitcase lay open on the bed, half filled with neatly folded shirts, the scent of his cologne still lingering in the air. Sarah perched on the edge of the mattress, hands clasped in her lap, watching her husband, Daniel, methodically pack for yet another business trip. "How long this time?" she asked, keeping her voice even. "A week. Maybe 10 days, Daniel replied, barely glancing up as he tucked a leather-bound notebook into his carry-on. Sarah nodded, though she already knew the answer. It was always a week, maybe 10 days. The words had become a script, their exchanges rehearsed and predictable, like an old song playing on repeat. He zipped up the suitcase with finality, then turned to her with a smile, gentle, warm, but distant. He kissed her forehead. "I'll call when I land." And then he was gone. The house felt cavernous in his absence. The silence pressed against her, thick and smothering. She wandered into the kitchen, making a pot of tea she wouldn't finish, staring out the window as the late autumn wind rattled the trees. A single leaf detached from its branch and spiraled downward, adrift, unmoored. Much like her, the days bled into each other. She went through the motions: morning coffee, emails, errands, dinners alone at the table, the empty chair across from her a quiet reminder of all the conversations they no longer had. She tried to busy herself. She scrolled through social media, bombarded with snapshots of perfect couples on vacations, anniversary posts filled with heartfelt declarations. She shut off her phone, feeling the weight of something unnamed settle in her chest. One evening, as she stepped onto the front porch, she noticed a shape in the dim glow of the street lamp, a dog, curled up at the base of her steps. His fur was a patchwork of black and white, his ribs faintly visible beneath the scruff. He lifted his head, ears twitching, and met her gaze. There was something about his eyes, steady, watchful, as if he understood something she didn't. Sarah hesitated, then crouched down. "Where did you come from?" The dog didn't move, didn't cower or run. He simply watched her, waiting. She exhaled. "All right. Stay there." She disappeared inside and returned with a plate of leftover chicken. The dog sniffed cautiously before eating, his tail giving a tentative wag. As she watched him, something shifted inside her, a flicker of warmth, a quiet companionship she hadn't realized she needed. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone, and she didn't want to be. The dog became part of her life with an ease that startled her. He was there in the mornings when she stepped outside with her coffee, waiting patiently at the porch. He trotted beside her on her evening walks, his paws patting softly against the pavement. He listened when she spoke, tilting his head as if considering her words. She named him Toby. Sarah had never been a dog person before, but Toby felt different, like something meant to fill the hollow spaces in her life. His presence soothed the silence that once suffocated her. When she laughed at his clumsy attempts to chase falling leaves, the sound felt foreign, almost forgotten. Her husband called one evening, his voice warm but distant through the speaker. "How's everything?" "Fine," she said automatically, but then hesitated. She glanced at Toby, curled at her feet. "Actually, I found a dog." "Well, he found me." "A dog?" Daniel sounded amused. "Since when do you like dogs?" Sarah smiled faintly. "I don't know. He just showed up one night. He's sweet. Follows me around like a shadow." Daniel chuckled. "Looks like you've got company." She wanted to tell him that it wasn't just company, it was comfort. That Toby was there in a way Daniel hadn't been for a long time. But she swallowed the thought. Instead, she said, "Yeah. I guess I do." The days passed, and her attachment to Toby deepened. She stopped watching the clock, counting down the days until Daniel's return. When she came home from work, she no longer felt the weight of emptiness pressing in. Toby greeted her with wagging enthusiasm, his brown eyes filled with unspoken devotion. Her phone buzzed less and less. The texts from Daniel, short check-ins, a sporadic "miss you," went unanswered longer each time. When she did respond, her messages felt obligatory, detached. One afternoon, a friend invited her out for coffee. Sarah almost agreed, then glanced at Toby, curled on the couch beside her. She ran a hand through his fur absent-mindedly. "Maybe another time," she texted back. Later that night, she sat on the floor beside Toby, her fingers tracing patterns in his fur. "You're the only one who's ever here," she murmured. Toby let out a soft sigh, shifting closer. Sarah exhaled, a pang of something sharp and unfamiliar twisting in her chest. She hadn't meant to replace her husband. But somehow, without realizing it, she had. Sarah knew something had shifted the moment she hesitated before answering Daniel's call. She stared at the screen, her finger hovering over the accept button, but a strange reluctance rooted her in place. Toby whined softly, pressing his warm muzzle against her knee. She stroked his head absently, her mind tangled in a feeling she couldn't quite name. When she finally answered, Daniel's voice was bright, unaware. "Hey, I've got good news, I'm coming home early." Sarah's stomach clenched. "Oh. When?" "Tomorrow night. Thought I'd surprise you." He laughed. "Guess I ruined that." Tomorrow she should have felt excited. Relief, even. But instead, a knot of unease coiled in her chest. "That's great," she said, but the words tasted hollow. After they hung up, she sat in silence, Toby's head still resting on her lap. She should have been thinking about Daniel, his return, the way things would go back to normal. But all she could think about was how much she had come to depend on the quiet companionship of the creature beside her. The next evening, as she stood by the window, waiting for Daniel's car to pull into the driveway, she felt an unfamiliar sense of panic. Would Toby understand? Would he feel abandoned? She glanced down at him. He was watching her, his brown eyes filled with something that felt dangerously close to human understanding. Then the headlights cut through the darkness, and the moment shattered. Daniel stepped through the door with a weary smile, dropping his bag by the entrance. Home sweet home. Sarah forced herself to return his embrace, to inhale the scent she once found comforting. But as his arms tightened around her, she realized something unsettling. She felt nothing. Later that night, as Daniel slept beside her, his breathing deep and steady, she slipped out of bed and padded toward the living room. Toby lifted his head as she sank down onto the couch beside him. She pressed her forehead to his, whispering words she could never say to Daniel. "I missed you." And for the first time, she admitted to herself, she didn't just love Toby, she had fallen in love with him. Morning light spilled through the curtains, casting long shadows across the bedroom. Sarah lay still, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. The weight of realization from the night before settled heavily on her chest. Daniel stirred beside her, stretching with a sleepy groan. Feels good to be home." His arm draped across her waist, but she barely felt it. She forced a smile. "Yeah, it does." But it didn't. Every part of her felt out of place, like a stranger in her own home. She had spent so long filling the emptiness with Toby's presence that Daniel now felt like the intrusion. As the morning unfolded, Daniel moved around the house, oblivious to the distance between them. He made coffee, scrolled through emails, talked about work. But Sarah barely heard him. Her eyes kept drifting to the door, to the quiet space outside where Toby usually waited. Daniel must have noticed because, after a while, he frowned. "You're distracted." She hesitated, fingers tightening around her coffee mug. "I'm just adjusting." "To what?" His voice was light, teasing, but when she didn't answer, the humor faded. "Sarah?" She looked at him then, really looked at him. The man she had built a life with. The man she had once loved without question. But now, all she felt was guilt. Not for what she had done, because what had she done, really, but for what she had allowed herself to feel. "I think," she swallowed hard, searching for words that wouldn't destroy them. "I think I got used to being alone." Daniel's brows pulled together. "You weren't alone, Sarah. I was still here." "Were you?" She wanted to ask. Or had he just been a ghost passing through, leaving only traces of himself behind? Before she could answer, a soft thud came from outside, the sound of paws against the wooden porch. "Toby." Daniel glanced toward the door, then back at her. His expression shifted, something clicking into place. "That dog." His voice was quiet, almost disbelieving. "This is about that dog, isn't it?" Sarah opened her mouth, but no words came. Daniel exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Jesus, Sarah. I travel for work, and you, what? Replace me with a stray?" "It wasn't like that," she said quickly, but even to her own ears, it sounded weak. Daniel shook his head, pushing away from the table. I don't even know what to say to that. Sarah's chest ached. Not because he was angry, but because she knew he wasn't wrong. She had fallen in love with the idea of something that couldn't betray her, couldn't leave her feeling unseen. But what kind of love was that? She didn't have an answer, and for the first time, she wasn't sure she wanted one.